Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. In the spirit of the trees, in the spirit of living nature, of which we are an integral part, with deep gratitude to all the generations before us that have brought us to the present moment, I want to welcome all of you to this session of Humanity Rising. Today is the 5th session of a 6-day program on the global phenomenon and challenge of mental health among the youth. Today, we want to explore the very important issue of parenting, and more broadly, how we care for our young during this time of planetary duress, the pandemic, climate change, war, electromagnetic forces from our various electronic devices. All kinds of things are affecting all of us generally, and our youth in particular. The general point that I'd like to make as we open up is that we're at one of those extraordinary moments in history which are affecting all of us in different ways, but equally profoundly. For the first time in the entire human journey, we find ourselves in a situation in which the human species itself is threatened with extinction, along with about 1 million other species on our planet. And that means that parenting, caring, must be understood as something that all of us need to engage in. And what I mean by that is something very specific. I'm a parent. I have 2 sons. I've loved them, I've nurtured them. But I don't have very much idea how to really parent under current global situation. The young people don't have a very good idea how to live their lives under current global situation. So the challenges that we are confronted by are an existential threat to all of us. And in that situation, it feels to me as a parent that in a fundamental way, we need to entertain the possibility that parenting itself, leadership itself, is being inverted by the existential threat that is confronting everyone, everywhere. And it may be time for us to expand the notion of parenting to include the young people parenting the parents. And I want to just bring in for our collective reflection today 2 movies, 2 great movies that have impacted world culture. One is Star Wars. The universe was under duress. And who was the hero that emerged? 16-year-old Luke Skywalker. That was what was needed at that level of existential threat. You think of the movie Dune. Again, the universe is in crisis. And who emerged as the Mahdi? Paul Atreides, 16 years old. So what's emerging in the culture, even at the level of archetypal entertainment, is a thought form that who we need to turn to at this time of duress are the young. And I would say, as a 71-year-old man, that the biggest problem in the world today is it's being run by old men. President Biden is 78 years old. Leaders around the world are aging. And that's a fundamental reason why we're not solving our problems. So as we begin our discussion of parenting, I just at the very beginning want to broaden it out so that we expand our categories of who needs to be teaching who needs to be leading who, with a view that all of us together are traversing an unknown world as we literally teeter on the precipice of extinction itself. And we all know this at some deep, intuitive, if not conscious level. And it may be a revolution is needed. And if you look at the history of revolution, it's almost always catalyzed by the young. So in that spirit, I want to invite you just to take a moment before we dive into our program to just center yourself in your body. Our bodies are nature. And close your eyes if you can, just for a minute, and breathe together. Centering your attention on your heart. Let us feel each other today. Let us feel our young. Let us feel our elders. And let us bring them together as one. Thank you, everyone. Now I would like to bring in our two moderators today, Christy Allen and Michaela Harley, who both work for the organization Frame, which is dedicated to youth empowerment during this moment in history where the youth are challenged in unprecedented ways, as are we all. And Christy and Michaela, you've done such a splendid job moderating over the last week. And I just want to acknowledge you as we start our program today with deep thanks for the leadership that you're providing. And I now turn the program over to you.
Thank you so much, Jim, for that introduction. And thank you for having us both this week. It's been such a pleasure to be here with you all. And welcome everyone to day 5 of the Global Youth Mental Health Summit. Michaela and I are really excited to join you today for another exciting discussion. And I'm going to pass it over to Georg actually to show the trailer for the Connecting the Dots film. So
it was my mistake, everyone.
Don't worry, it's all good.
I was so excited about getting into the program, I forgot the most important, and that is to show the trailer for the film. which Georg will now do, and then Christy and Michaela will take it from there. Thank you.
Do people know what mental health is? Do people know what mental illness is?
Every single one of you in here that's battling, every one of you that feels like you're alone, every one of you who feels like nobody understands you, how many of you relate to what I'm talking about? Raise your hand.
There should be some kind of a system that talks about mental health problems in schools, like in lessons, just anywhere really.
They're having to deal with a lot of very, very ill people rather than it being more about prevention.
Youth mental health, it's the same story everywhere I go.
I want to get to the root of it and to really figure out the why from the mouth and the stories of young people.
I can sometimes feel a panic attack. Like I woke up this morning and I knew for a fact I was going to have a panic attack.
I'm taking this because I think if I look in my face, it'll calm me down.
I don't even see myself alive after high school.
People need to hear the truth that most kids our age are not fine.
I never saw myself represented anywhere. I felt like it was very invisible. Not only being a woman, but a Black Muslim woman, I just thought that those problems were for everybody except people like me.
I don't want other young people to feel the way I did growing up. Finally, I have a chance to fight the system.
I think we need to start hearing from young people like myself when making policies related to somebody's mental health.
There are so many things inherent to a space when you build it up properly that help people become more resilient and help people find community. When you make sure a space is safe, where you make sure that everybody feels welcome into a space, people feel like they can be themselves. I'm telling my story. It's literally making something painful inside beautiful.
So sick of being unhappy because I'm so young, and I feel like I need to be able to experience the world in a positive, healthy way.
I just wanted to be accepted for who I am, and I just wanted to be loved.
It took me 5 years to finally open up about my mental illness, but it wasn't as scary as I thought. It was one of the best things I've ever done.
Young people have to know that even though at times they may feel that they're in the darkness, if they could just know just to hold on, that light is going to come over the horizon.
The minute we start talking about mental illness, then people will not be ashamed.
I just really hope the world could change.
Now, Michaela and Christy.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jim. So welcome back, everyone, to Day 5 of the Global Youth Mental Health Summit. We'll start by sharing a bit about our previous discussions this week. So on Monday, we discussed the state of global youth mental health, and we explored resiliency mindsets, finding sources of strength and support through community, toolkits, and music, mind-body connections, and how shared understanding and preventative measures can promote positive mental health and well-being in young people. On Tuesday, we explored themes of belonging, community, and spirituality. We discussed how youth are innately spiritual beings and the importance of finding your community and knowing that you're not alone. On Wednesday, we talked about gender and questioning, and we explored the importance of parents and youth alike finding commonality in their own questioning and learnings about gender, and the gifts that can come from exploring these questions in safe spaces with supportive communities. And yesterday, we explored the impact of the environment and climate change on mental health. We explored the importance of taking action ourselves and within communities to find hope, and how we can each take things one small step at a time to generate collective change. And finally, on Monday, we'll share a rebroadcast of a previous event that explored youth mental health, substance use, and music, which takes place inside a life-sized harp. We hope to see you at the event next week, and we hope that you enjoyed the discussions earlier this week. But as a reminder, if you did miss a session, not to worry, they're recorded for you to view later. So for today, our final discussion of the week, we'll explore parenting and youth mental health. Our modern society has become disconnected from the earth and each other. The state of natural mental health has been lost as a result of the loss of good psychological, social, and environmental conditions. And in the past, these healthy conditions were created by family and community, which held the core values in common of supporting each other and providing support to one another. We've forgotten how to achieve harmonious relationships and be effective parents. Reconnecting with ourselves, with each other, and with nature holds the promise of achieving a healthy environment for our youth. So we're very pleased today to be joined by our wonderful panel and our expert, Dr. Meredith Sagan, accompanied by youth film participants from around the world, and director Noemi Weiss and executive producer Tom Eddington of Connecting the Dots to share what we've collectively talked about this week, explore what they talked about in the film, and what needs to change for a brighter future ahead. And I'll pass it over to Michaela to introduce our panel.
Wonderful, thanks, Christy. All right, so exciting. Let's dive in. I want to take a moment to introduce our panel of experts today. So as Christy mentioned, we're joined by a variety of experts. I'll go through a little bit about who they are, but there is more information online if you'd like to learn more on the Connecting the Dots and Humanity Rising page. So we are joined again today by the wonderful Angel Richards from Ajax, Ontario. You may recognize her from the first session of the week, where there was a panel discussion on the state of global youth mental health, and from the Connecting the Dots film. Angel has channeled her years of suffering with depression and anxiety and harnessed that into using music as a way to cope with past traumas, to escape, heal, and inspire others. Through her many advocacy projects, Angel looks forward to shedding more light on the reality of what it's like to live with a mental illness. We're joined again by the fabulous Finty Royal, who is a medical student and international mountain runner, passionate about creating change within the healthcare system so that young people have the best chance of reaching their full potential. Finty is involved with many advocacy efforts, including being a youth ambassador for the National Autistic Society and speaking at conferences on topics of mental health and autism. Finty is one of the youth film participants in the Connecting the Dots film, and has the hopes that more young people can be empowered to talk about mental health. We're also joined today by the wonderful Lexi Shepard, who began her mental health journey with her participation in the Connecting the Dots film. Lexi is also a dancer, a published author, and member of the LGBTQ+ community. Next, we're also grateful to have Mariana Floyd joining us again. She's an advocate in many ways, including through her research in legal psychology and psychological well-being, as well as through her participation in the Connecting the Dots film, which was a very enriching experience for her professionally and has also helped her to gain a more broad and holistic view of social problems. We are also joined today by the fabulous Dr. Meredith Sagan, who is a UCLA-trained holistic psychiatrist who holds a master's in international public health, has a fellowship in child and youth and adolescent psychiatry, and is an expert in treating trauma and addiction through movement and body-based therapy methods. She has over 25 years of professional experience working with children, adolescents, and adults in a variety of different contexts, including the foster care system, inpatient and outpatient behavioral health, juvenile hall correction facilities, residential treatment facilities, and a successful Santa Monica-based private practice. We also have the wonderful Lear Weltzman on the panel, bringing their experience as the founder of Breaking the Chalk, an education and mental health company, which aims to provide education and support for youth mental health with progressive education, therapy, and awareness for the needed change. Lear also brings their lived expertise as an individual who has personally struggled with mental illness and is passionate about sharing her story through her advocacy efforts and her company. Lear is leading efforts to improve youth mental health and education by empowering our future generation. Next, we're also joined by the fabulous Noemi Weiss, who is an award-winning writer, director, and producer who has spent 20 years telling stories on the big and the small screens, including, but definitely not limited to, the Connecting the Dots film. Fun fact, she's been honored with an invitation to meet Pope Francis at the Vatican in recognition of the impact her films have had in global communities. And finally, we're grateful to also be joined by Tom Eddington, who is an author, executive coach, business advisor, and executive producer of Connecting the Dots. As a scholar of conscious leadership, he is passionate about bringing more conscious leadership into the world, which he does through his coaching and advisory work, film and media projects, as well as board positions. I want to take pause to thank each and every one of our panelists for being here today, to offer your perspectives and your expertise in the quest of propelling the state of youth mental health forward. Thank you again to each of you. It's incredibly important, and myself, Christy, Jim, the audience, we're all very grateful. Throughout our panel today, we will leave space for conversation, and we'll also layer in questions that come up from us and any audience questions that are put in the chat. So we will monitor that. So with that, let's jump in. To start, I'd like to ask Dr. Meredith Sagan a few questions, if you don't mind. And I wondered if you could start by sharing a little bit about your work and what called you to do the work that you do. Oh, sorry, Dr. Sagan, you're on mute, if you don't mind.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so pleased to be here. This is such an imperatively important discussion. You know, I grew up with a mother who had a mental illness. And so from the time I was 5 years old, I was very interested. And I knew that I wanted to be either a psychologist or a psychiatrist, somebody who investigated what brings happiness, health, mental health. And so that was very compelling for me. I went through my entire childhood education with a goal of becoming a mental health practitioner. And ultimately, I decided to be a psychiatrist because I think it gives me the most versatility in the tools that I have and that I can use to help people. So ultimately, I would say what led me to becoming a psychiatrist was really to help people. Also, I think that something to take note of is that many people who are in the mental health profession also see it as a vehicle for which to learn and grow about themselves. So it was very much also for me a part of my own personal path of learning and growing to find my own way into happiness.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And it really resonates with me as an individual who grew up having experienced some challenges around anxiety and depression, which led me to get a degree in social work. And that has been really wonderful, just learning about myself, but also being able to support people in my community and things like that. So I definitely resonate with what you're saying and love that piece around like that lifelong learning, which I think is really beautiful. And in that regard, I wonder what your thought is on the state of global youth mental health, and if there's any lessons learned that you have around, youth trying to access, mental health services and the role within that of parents and caregivers.
So I would say in terms of the state of global mental health, I think there's a lot of confusion right now about what brings health, what brings happiness. And that is the big part of the conversation that we've had here this week. I think that finding health is a journey from the inside out, and we need to have some general pointers and direction to do so. And in the past, parents set the culture for their children of what the belief system was. Now, I think that with the internet, with online searching, Googling, there's access to almost too much information. And the conversation around parenting is so essential, because I think that the more that parents can really take back control of what they want to give their children, the culture, what you do and don't do in your family, what you like and don't like, what you believe in, what you don't believe in, spending quality time to be able to convey that to your kids is essential. I think that this is such an important conversation around what parents can do to help to raise their kids right, to to avoid mental health issues. I think in the field of mental health, we know that prevention is key. Prevention is key. And the question I think now for parents is, how do we prevent the issues that we see? I'm a parent. I heard some other people today on the panel say they're parents. And essentially, we have to start before our kids are born. And once we already have children, school-age children, teenagers, we can always get more education to learn and grow about what we can do to take the power back, take the control back over parenting our kids. So I know that's a very broad answer, but I hope that that gave some information.
No, definitely. That absolutely did. And it sounds like there's a lot of important themes that you had highlighted, including, the need to support your children very young. And I know that increasingly there have been a lot of conversations around infant mental health and prenatal mental health and prenatal care, which I think from personal experience anyways, not that I'm a parent, but just what I've seen in terms of trends over the years, that's definitely increased, which I think is so important, as you mentioned, kind of that lifespan and supporting as early on as possible. And I know that you had mentioned some of the challenges or barriers that some parents face in supporting their children and supporting their mental health, but I wondered, what do you think parents need to support their children? And what are some of the barriers faced by parents, and what can we do to support them? I know it's a big question with many layers, but I would be curious to know your take on that.
Can you ask the different points one more time so I can address all of them? You had 3.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would be curious to know, from your perspective, what do parents need to support their children? And I guess my other question too, I know that there was 3, but I think what I'd be curious about is, what are the current barriers faced by parents in order to support that environment of kind of optimal mental health, and what can we do to support parents as a community?
Those are great questions. I think they're essential questions to ask. It's interesting, you brought up the idea of infant mental health, and that prompted me to think about parents' mental health. Because in order for infants to have good mental health, parents themselves should have good mental health. And so then the question is, what can we do as parents to prepare ourselves to parent, to have an infant, to have kids? And I think that self-education is so important as a parent. You really need to know what you're getting into, to do the personal growth work early on, and say that you haven't done that, and now you found yourself in the midst of parenting and you're feeling overwhelmed. I think that it's never too late to get to know yourself as a parent, about your own value system, about your own culture, about what makes you happy. Because as parents, we are at the helm of leadership for our children. And we need to really realize that if we're not parenting our own kids, no one else is going to. At these days, there's so much awareness on mental health professionals, which is really great. However, a mental health professional can only do so much. The parent themselves really needs to know, be their own guide for their kids. We cannot give away our parenting to other people, to teachers, to nannies, to mental health professionals, etc. And so then the question is, well, how do I get control over my own ability to parent? That goes back to this idea of my own personal growth. As a parent, I have to be connected to myself. And so when you asked about barriers that we're facing as parents, it is very challenging, because now generally it used to be that in a traditional family society, you had one parent who was staying at home, usually the mom, and another parent who went out to work, who was the dad usually. These days, we've got to have two parents working. Sometimes it's the woman, it's the mom who's the earner. Sometimes the dad is staying at home more. So this is a challenging situation because just inherently there's some things that women are, let's say, more inclined to know how to do with kids than men. It's all kind of mixed up now, in terms of the skill sets. So I think that in terms of barriers, we have to think about how do we want to structure our family? We have to think about how are we going to organize our time, knowing that two parents need to both be working. How are we going to organize our time to spend time with our kids? There's so much here, but it's about organization from the ground floor up, knowing oneself, self-care as a parent, structuring family time, structuring roles as parents, who does what, and we have to have like this really nice infrastructure to raise our kids in. And to me, that's a big barrier to even creating that infrastructure because the knowledge isn't even really there. It used to be so innate, right? We just had like this 50s family that knew what to do. We don't have that anymore. So we've got to build all of this from the ground floor up now. And so I think if you could say the biggest barrier would be self-care, knowing oneself and having the time and space to even sort all of this out in your head. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. We did have a question in the chat. Mary, thank you for posing it. It says, Dr. Senge said it, so I was referring to her when she was saying, taking back control, if you could elaborate on that as you were talking.
Oh, thank you so much for bringing that piece back. That's a really, it's a tough one because you see that a lot of parents now are putting their kids on screens as babysitters from the time that they're very young. And we don't really know as parents, right? We've only had screen time, social media, etc., YouTube since really 2010 is when it's 2022. This has been 12 years only that we've encountered this as parents. And so you see a lot of parents right now using screens as babysitters, as surrogates. You need to get your housework done. You need to cook, have the kids watch TV. Generally, you don't know what content the kids are watching. I'm sure that there's parents out there listening right now that really can relate to this. We don't always know what our kids are watching. So really taking back control means getting kids off of the screens. Or if you need to use a screen to babysit your kid while you do dinner, housework, or do something you need to do, know what the content is. Make an educated choice about what you want your kids to be watching. And then that goes back to knowing yourself as a parent. What do you like? What don't you like? What is your culture? What do you want to teach your kids? That is so variable depending on the individual that you are and how your family is constructed. So to take back control, it really does have to do with, you have to move from the inside out. Know yourself, know what you want, give that to your kids, be the leader, be the driver of the vehicle of your family as a parent. So I think that the biggest thing is really to take back control. The first step would be just take back control over the screen. What are they watching? There's so much that comes in through this portal of access to the world. We must control that as parents. We must realize that sometimes it's just too much too soon, especially for our teens. It's too much too soon.
Doctor, I agree with everything you're saying, and I thank you so much because I feel like it's such an educational topic. You also mentioned something about organization, and it led me to think about the stability and the importance of stability for a child, and knowing that their parents are there and they can go to their parents if anything. And it seems like and I was looking at some of the chat too, it seems like they're looking for like a mix, like the structure that used to be there and the stability. But then now I think the difference is we do need to be having those conversations that I feel like were not had before, like in the household, if you know what I mean. And I was wondering if you could talk on that, because you and just lend a bit of the education behind that and maybe the science behind that.
When you say conversations, which conversations are you referring to? Would it be conversations around what kids have seen on the screens? Would it be conversations about what's going on at school? Because I think this idea of conversation, you know, at the beginning of today's program, we talked about the importance of community building. We talked about the idea of children actually educating their parents about what they're experiencing and what they need. What we didn't say, but what was implied, was listening on the behalf of parents. So the idea of this conversation, I think, is so important. Of what is the conversation? What is the structure around the conversation? Who is the leader? And how do we create an atmosphere that's productive? So when you said the word conversation, can you tell me more about what you mean by that word?
Absolutely. Immediately I start thinking about the lack of conversation around mental health, period, right? Like emotions. And I'm always amazed when I meet parents who tell me like that they do walk their kids through the emotions, like what are you feeling right now, and like how to handle that and deal with that. And it's like they're actually giving them the tools that right now I can personally say I'm having to learn right now in my early 20s, these tools. And it was never a conversation. And I can actually vouch for although I've grown up some, I have benefited as a person. There's been like a void filled as my parent has learned more about mental health and we're able to talk about it and communicate. And even seeing them communicate their feelings has helped me, because at the end of the day, I am always looking to them. I can't help it, right? So seeing them be able to be in touch with their emotions, whereas I do remember a few years ago when we were taught, don't even talk about that or suppress it. So does that kind of explain like what I mean about like conversations? Like,
yes, I think that that's so essential. So it sounds like, and I think that we can get to the answer through this conversation between you and I, it sounds like over time your parents actually learned about how to work with their own emotions, that maybe while they were parenting, they were busy, they were overwhelmed, that they were working, just dealing with the modern day challenges of parenting, and that because of whatever happened in their life, they had to learn about their emotions. And then they opened up the conversation with you to feel more comfortable sharing. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. And I'm seeing the shift because before, and I always grew up hearing like, it was, you know, we're expressing love through providing for you. And now I think as youth too, we have access to so much to even get it on our own. We have a whole new career now where people are becoming influencers and can sometimes get the money by themselves at an early age, that what we really want is that connection and love from our parents. Whereas I know for a fact that a lot of parents that I've spoken to, they did not even have that emotional support or that conversation. What they had was their parents telling them that I'm providing for you, and that's my expression of love. So it's not necessarily, I think, on purpose that this was missing. It's just I've seen the change, and so us as the upcoming generation, I'm excited because this conversation then I can pass on to my kids. So knowing that I've done that work beforehand. But yeah, I think my parents have learned now because of the conversation opening up. I've actually heard my mother say that, like, I'm so surprised I didn't even know I felt this way, and she's able to communicate to me. Like, that was what was really going on when I was maybe ignoring you, but she couldn't express it at the time because there wasn't this conversation. There was a lot of stigma around it too, which we are breaking right now, having these kind of summits. But yeah.
So inspiring, you know, to see how love is the ultimate leader for all of us. Because as parents, we love our kids so much. We really do. We want the best for them, but we don't always know what to do or how to give that love. And so this idea of providing as the expression of love, it's true. As parents, we've got to get out there and hustle and provide and, just get the bare basics met, food, clothing, shelter. And now we're kind of seeing the results of focusing on the providing exclusively that we've neglected maybe over the past 10 years, 15 years, by using screens as babysitters because we didn't know better. This idea of having a family structure, because it has become quite chaotic. You asked about, organization, stability, because that really does provide a framework to have conversations, even if it's just an hour around dinner. You can use that hour to open up a conversation about, hey, how was your day? What did you experience at school? How was the playground? Did anything happen? Oh, something happened. How are you feeling about that? Well, let me tell you what I would do in that situation. This is how I would handle this as your parent. Maybe you can try this tomorrow with your friend and see how it goes. That is literally the conversation that we can have as parents with our children to kind of steer the vehicle of the upbringing of our kids. But the issue is everything has become so chaotic, we've lost that conversation. Like a lot of parents, it's just like, microwave the dinner, here you go, have it, do your homework, I'm getting home late from work. It's not easy. But I think that this conversation is so essential, that we've got to bring back the framework, bring back the structure. That's the beginning piece. And even knowing that structure is important is, something to even be talked about. It's a conversation. So.
And I think sometimes things it's hard to execute, easier said than done. But awareness is so important because things may have been very different had it not been even in the back of your mind. And sometimes it's the little things that you do with that awareness in the back that do make a difference. And all you can do is try your best at the end of the day, right? So I think awareness is just the first step, and at least we can start from there.
So it sounds like what you're saying is that even the idea of say that your mom is cooking dinner, even as she's cooking dinner or microwaving the meal or whatever she has time for, just even opening up the conversation about emotions, about your day, even that would be helpful, as opposed to if you come with emotions saying oh, I had this hard time and, oh, sorry, I don't have time to listen. I'm providing and that's how I'm caring. Just taking that pause to actually for a parent to be oh, wait, I can provide as I listen. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and I'll give an example, and I think as kids, we do watch everything, and I can remember seeing her busy and thinking and never feeling listened to. Mm-hmm. And that shaped a lot of how I went about my life. But the difference would be, and that I've seen in the recent, maybe 3 years, is, for example, if she's cooking, she's busy, because there's 5 of us, I should say, there's 5 girls, and she'd come home from work, she was the breadwinner.
Amazing.
And it's amazing, honestly, that now I can look back and say, you were handling so much. How did you do it? And the difference now is if she tells me, Angel, I'm just so tired. I love talking to you and I'll talk to you later. Whereas before it was tune me out. And sometimes it's just a miscommunication. And I take this as I'm not important. This person doesn't love me. I'm going to disappear. Where now I can turn around and say she's human. And even if I do want that soft place to fall, it's a different feeling, knowing in the back of my mind that my mom's she's busy or she's tired. So I think even if it's a sticky situation, she is very busy, that communication piece is a good starting point for me to even change how I talk to myself. Because as kids, I do think, and I've experienced taking what they say or the messages I'm getting from them and creating my own tape loop, which we have to undo a lot of times after a while when we start our journey of healing and stuff. Does that make sense?
So much sense.
Yeah.
I really get what you're saying. Your advice, which is interesting because we talked about kids now being, as a way, leaders of their parents in what there is to do. it sounds like perhaps your advice would be to your mom or to parents out there would be take the pause, take the breath in the midst of the busyness and all that there is to do. These ideas of self-connection, mind-body connection, breathing, relaxing music, like take a moment to pause, take a breath, and be available to have a conversation as opposed to getting caught up in the busyness.
Yeah, wherever they can, right? Because life is crazy, but wherever they can, it makes a difference, those little moments.
I think there's been so many great things shared here. I'm just going to jump in because I want to open it up to the rest of the panel as well. And I really appreciate these questions that you brought in, Angel. And I know Noemi had her hand up and Lear had her hand up as well. I also just wanted to acknowledge really quickly, I think Dr. Sagan brought in a great point about family structure. And I just wanted to bring up that family structure looks very different in lots of different contexts. There's lots of single parent families, lots of families with 2 moms and 2 dads. And my family structure is not the typical 1 mom, 1 dad structure as well. So I just wanted to acknowledge that family looks different to a lot of different people in this conversation. And with that, I can pass it to either Noemi or Lear, whoever would like to go first.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sagan. Thank you, Angel, for all those wonderful thoughts. It's very interesting when you speak about maternal mental health and when you speak about infant mental health. When I started with connecting the dots, because I was coming from 5 years of working in my film Milk, which is about the commercialization of birth and infant feeding, and having been with moms from around the world, I started with infant mental health. And when I connected with the group here in Toronto that leads infant mental health, they were completely astonished that I was dealing with a film about teenagers, and I was curious to know what was happening at infant mental health. It is very important. I learned a lot, and there's a lot of studies that bring the state of parents in when they are of mothers, particularly when they are carrying a baby and their state of it. And I have learned and seen incredible footage of babies inside the womb and how they feel when the mom is stressed. And this is in the UK, something that is still under development, but it's just incredible to see that. Having said that, just as a background, I think that the importance here that we've been talking all along, and I think part of what we've been talking the whole week and in the film as well, is how important it is for young people to be heard and to be part of the conversation. And that's why we are all here today, to be part of that conversation. And I think that yesterday was very interesting when Tom asked Jake and what was needed from parents and adults to help, and he said nothing, just stay and wait. We don't want your unsolicited advice, and I think that there's something there that it's important to understand as well, is the validation of that moment for that young adult that needs to be in their space, to be able to work out their own things. And we talk with Dr. Goodall, and I'm bringing everything that we learned from the week to lead into the conversation that we'll all have. Dr. Goodall said, everybody wants to talk to a stranger. It's much easier to talk to a stranger. So there's a barrier there for the parents that we are hearing the whole week. How do I deal with this? This is my life. My life are my kids. I work, I do everything. But the first nucleus of society is the family, right? And we start from that root. How do we teach parents how to do this? Parents, what I've seen in many of the post-screening conversations is that parents have a lot of difficulty dealing with young people because they don't have the language. And they have also encountered what you were talking, Dr. Sagan, about the fact that these kids have so much information that they cannot keep up. Parents are very scared of technology, and it's something that we need to support them and teach them so they can be part of that conversation. And I think understanding from the young people as well And it's good to hear Angel talking about this. Where does that teenager come in place into blaming that parent for not doing what they were supposed to do? Because we are not here to blame anyone. We are here to work together as a community, as a group, as a family, as being together and understanding that parents are doing the best that they can and the best that they learn, and never to hurt anyone. So there's a lot of feelings that come, of course. We talk about emotions, which are not easy, but I would love to open it up to the young people right now joining us, and hear what they think, what they've learned from the week, and what they think about this, because our biggest mission in the film, Dr. Sagan, is that we don't talk about them without them.
True.
So please go ahead.
I'll pass it to Lear.
Thank you. So I just want to say thoughts on a few things. On the one thing was the self-care for parents. And I think it's almost like, and kind of how they need to look after their mental health and have that awareness to be able to help the kids. And I think the first things about like infants, and it's starting to talk about emotions and mental health and taking care of yourself from like first days, to be able for the teens to know that it is something that we speak about in the home, and then for adults, you know, so they can know how to look after their mental health and that it's a thing. I think a lot of it is for parents to be able to know how they're doing and how they're feeling in a moment. It's like almost when a baby has a tantrum and then the parents are like, ah, and then they kind of put their anxieties onto the kid. And a lot of it is like, okay, how am I feeling? And then kind of regulating themselves as a parent and then helping the kid. Or if it's a teenager, we worry so much. And then we have, like as parents, they're having a lot of anxiety about it. And then we sometimes put it onto the kid. And it's just, I mean, for me as a teenager who started to struggle with their mental health, I had no knowledge about mental health and it wasn't anything spoken about. I mean, I told my parents everything, but the actual mental health, I had no idea what was happening. And I always like look back and I say, well, I think that if mental health was spoken about, if it's spoken with his parents, it would have helped so much in the journey of it. And I would have understood, being like, I knew something was weird and off, but I didn't know what it was. And it would have been so helpful to know. And I think the main thing about mental health is knowledge and awareness. And once we do have that, it helps so much to kind of navigate the rest of it. And yeah, I think that's an important like thing to say. But with regards to kind of the space of teenagers and what do we do and how do parents come forward with it, I think creating parents having the knowledge and parents having the awareness and acceptance that mental health is actually a thing, and just kind of building a safe space in the home and just giving the child the affirmation that this is something we speak about and you can come to me with anything. I think just saying that and giving that affirmation and for the child and teenager to know is like really a game changer. And for me personally, it was. And with the kids I work with, I see when the parents are like that, it's really, really helpful. So I think really knowledge for parents and awareness and support for them as well is really important for them to be able to put that in within the household and through their children. So that's just something, my thoughts.
And I think, I mean, my situation is different from everyone sitting around me virtually, but what I've gathered from talking to my family, you know, mental health problems run in my family on both sides, both my mom and my dad. And, you know, it was never talked about with me as a child, which we've touched on, because, you know, why would a parent want to burden their child with this weight that they carry around? And as I started to struggle and got diagnosed with clinical depression, social anxiety, etc., you know, my mom specifically started to share that she had struggled with the same issues that I was having. She had just finished her master's degree. She had 2 healthy kids. and she was depressed. And she reached out for help and is doing wonderful now. But it's just a very interesting balance because I think, and I am not a mom, so I cannot speak for parents, but I can speak from the child's perspective. It's very interesting how sometimes I think parents try to like shield their children from some aspects of the world. And maybe in mental health, that's not the best thing to do, because now my mom and I have a very intense dialogue about mental health because here I am talking to people, strangers that I don't know, about mental health. So it's very interesting how that dynamic changed and how we got to where we are now. But obviously, every family dynamic is different. And mine, unfortunately, it took a very traumatic event to change that dynamic. So unfortunately, that has to switch, if that makes any sense.
Thank you.
I think like what we've got to think about is that like young people today are like the parents of tomorrow. So the fact that we're starting to be able to talk about mental health more is actually really good, because I think one of the issues with sort of our parents and that generation is that, you know, they're not very good at talking about the mental health, and therefore, you know, that kind of gets passed down onto the children until the children realize, actually, you know, we need to talk about mental health if we want to, you know, be mentally well. So I think it's really positive that, you know, our generation is kind of learning the vocabulary to talk about mental health, because it's also knowing the vocabulary, because, you know, if you don't know how to talk about mental health, how can you actually talk about it, if you know what I mean? So yeah.
Yeah, and on that note, since this is a conversation about a film and Dr. Sagan brought up screens, which I think is fundamental, I just wanted to go back to what Jim said when he brought up Star Wars, because that film is a film about the redemption of the father caused by the teachings of the son. Vader redeems himself because of what he learned from Luke. And I think that's something that we talked about on Wednesday with Dr. Sherkin and Lexi, about how we're all learning, but also how about parents learn from their kids when they bring home something that parents never talked about before, or maybe never questioned, like, for example, their gender. And there's like this quote where Luke looks at Vader and he says, "I want to save you." And Vader takes off his helmet and he tells him that he already has. And I've found some parents to be really thankful for what they've learned from their kids. Dr. Sherkin even said that she felt blessed by having the opportunity of learning from her kid to question herself as well. So I think Star Wars is a great reference, and it's a good movie about how young people can be the ones who bring change. And it's just like connecting the dots, right? How parents can learn from their kids and expand and broaden their minds and their souls. And I think media, documentaries, movies can also carry that hopeful message, like Star Wars, for example, or like connecting the dots. So definitely it's a call for more of these products, because they can really reach a lot of people and start this much needed conversation, like Dr. Sagan said.
Thank you, Mariana, for connecting the dots together with Star Wars. And I think that it makes me laugh. Sorry about that, but I think it's great. I mean, I think the message is important. We all together made the film, right? I could not make the film without your voices, without your stories, with the goal that we were putting together to make it, and the intentions that the film is just exclusively the voices of young people is because it's time for the parents to listen. It's time for society to listen. As Dr. Goodall said yesterday, we have done something wrong as a society to have this generation of young people feeling the way they do. And it's time to correct it. And I think that there is hope. We cannot lose that hope. We talked about the hope yesterday. And Finti, when you're saying you are the parents of tomorrow, absolutely. If you are able to make that change, but you've got to be in that conversation. You have to be part of that conversation in schools, with politicians, with everybody who actually is involved as a society, right? And Mariana is the one who talks in the film about the importance of everyone becoming an agent of change. Maybe you can expand on that, Mariana.
Well, yeah, I think definitely this week it has been shown that people getting together and starting the conversation, it gets us to reflect and like Dr. Sagan said, we don't all, like, professionals in mental health are very much needed, but it's not just us. I'm a psychologist myself, but we need teachers, we need parents, we need friends, we need everyone to be talking about it and to have to give the space to talk about it. And maybe they don't have all the tools, and that's fine, but there is a very much needed space to talk about this. And like you were talking with Lexi and with Finty, Angel, and just having the space to talk about it with your mom, with your friend, even if it's not something so serious as getting down and just pouring all your emotions out. Maybe even it's just how was your day? How was it? Well, if I were you, I would do this, I would do that. That's just, it's so helpful, and it's so surprising that not all of us have had that, because it sounds so basic and so fundamental. But here we are having this conversation and hoping to get this message across to other people to get to think about it.
I just wanted to say that I think one of the views of the youth today, we speak up, and I agree. And like media and everything gets complicated, and there's the pros and cons. But one of the things that we really are quite outspoken and starting to be more outspoken about mental health in the media. And I think it's a great opportunity to also have a safe space, but also bring awareness into it, and breaking, and speaking about the stigmas and the stereotypes and the taboos, and bringing some sort of awareness into it. But it's definitely also needs to be parents, and like we said, within all sectors, it needs to be spoken about to create the most support and to create the most change. With my work, I see when one party is just not there, it's just there's no consistency, and a lot with the parents, they don't want to speak about it, and it's very hush hush, and it's quite hard when you have to be the one that's listen, we need to get it. So I think that a good thing about media and the youth is that they are speaking up, and we do want to be heard. And one of the topics is mental health that I really do see that's being spoken about, and hopefully more. But definitely we are wanting to be empowered with it and spoken about. But it is within all sectors that it does need to be shown some sort of support for mental health.
Right.
I'll go ahead and jump in. This has been just an absolutely wonderful dialogue today. And I certainly appreciate Dr. Sagan, you joining us today, and each of you who've been with us throughout the week. And the week is beyond what I had hoped when Nomi and I started this conversation a number of months ago about what we could actually create and bring to the world around the importance of this topic. And I love each of you in the perspectives that you're bringing to the conversation. And there are a couple of pieces that we haven't talked about. And somebody referenced it earlier this week that there were no auto accidents in the world until the car was created. And that's a silly thing to say. And yet with the technology that we have, whether it's social media or the internet or anything else, it took many, many decades for us to put in stop signs and traffic lights and driver's education. And the technology that's being rolled out today is so powerful. And we don't have the lines painted in the center of the road. We don't have the stop signs. We don't have driver's education. And all of that technology is out there without the rules, without the structure, without the order. And picking up on something you shared at the beginning of this conversation, Dr. Sagan, about the parents taking responsibility, but they need more than just parents. We need educators, we need our political leaders taking responsibility, and industry leaders in the technology world taking responsibility. And that it's still very new. And there's a lot of resistance for people to want to have these conversations and the impact it's having on the children. So I just wanted to bring that into our conversation. It's been referenced, it's been referred to. With the gun violence here in the US, we have that same issue where the manufacturers and the various stakeholders aren't wanting to take responsibility for gun ownership and gun use. And that's very present here in America in particular. And picking up on something, Mariana, you mentioned earlier, as a parent, for me, my children have been two of my best teachers. When I think about my entire life, what I've learned from my children has been extraordinary, not only about being a parent, but about myself. And as adults, we have a responsibility to continue to be lifelong learners, to continue to learn and grow and be open to different points of view. And our children will give us that gift if we allow them to do so. So I just wanted to throw in some of those pieces, in addition to just a big thank you to each of you for being part of this week, this incredibly important conversation. And I want to thank Nomi in particular for her bringing each of you to this conversation and creating the film so that this conversation can happen. And hopefully the content from this week has been a catalyst for many millions of conversations around the world.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you. These conversations, films of this nature, are done to have conversations. And that's why we've been doing so many screenings around the world for the last year and a bit. And a lot of you have been with me in some of these screenings. We can see the impact that the film can create by opening up the conversation. Without that conversation, it's not possible to make a change. And everyone is invited to be part of that conversation. Not everybody wants to talk about mental health because it's a topic that is very difficult. And there's some cultures where they still have an issue talking about mental health. So the more we talk about it, and particularly in African countries, I remember when we were shooting, filming shooting is a bad word in the lingo, but actually it's really under the conditions that it's a word that should be disappearing from the film industry. When we were filming in Zimbabwe and talking to the young people, they talked a lot about how they could not talk about mental health in their community, in their family. It was absolutely impossible. How they could not talk about gender differences with their family because it was impossible. But they have the internet. So let's talk about the other side of the coin and see what the internet has provided these young people. Their problems were very similar to problems of kids in North America and in Latin America and in Australia and everywhere else, because they were talking to each other. And they very clearly said in very many conversations, we need to break that chain. We don't want to be like our parents and our grandparents that we can't talk. So we are bringing that conversation forward. And we need to talk about it. And if it's uncomfortable, they'll be uncomfortable and be it. But how do I do that? And the truth is that the peer-to-peer support that has emerged in the world, to be able to have peer supporting peers that we see in the film all along, and is because it takes about 15 years to have a Dr. Sagan. How long does it take to produce another psychiatrist? There's no time. There's an epidemic going on that people need to understand. There's something going on with young people that it has never faced us before. So the peer-to-peer support comes in handy, but we have to support those kids as well. They are young people, and Micaela and Lexi, you're working in that world. Maybe you can talk about that peer-to-peer support and what do we need to do to support people like you, because it's so difficult not having the support and being faced to listen to these stories that are not always so easy.
You know, it's interesting, just to give everyone background. My story, I attempted suicide, and my FERPA, which is protection of a student's privacy in education, was broken by my school and my entire community, because I grew up in a small town, was broken. So it was plastered all over social media. So my rights, basically from the jump, I was poster child. This person has mental health issues. So as my family was processing and going through all of that, I had a lot of families and people reaching out, but they didn't want my family to tell anyone that they were reaching out and that they had similar issues. So we all have these issues from what I've experienced in my personal story, but some people are still very uncomfortable talking about it. And some people did not want me to participate in the documentary because it would follow my name. Some people were like, you know, you got to think about your career, etc. And I think it's just a very, still with older generations, still a very taboo subject. And maybe some people believes it's painted you as weak, but I think quite the opposite now. I don't understand their train of thought, but that's just my personal experience, that is a very real and still a very large topic of conversation within my own community.
Yeah, thank you, Lexi. And that brings me to a memory when we first met, and the first conversation I had with Lexi was with her mother sitting beside her. Her mother didn't speak really, just let Lexi speak, but she was there. She was there to make sure that this was going to be a good conversation, and what are we going to talk about, and is it okay to talk about it? But the good thing about having shared your incident and how your community had really put you aside because of mental health, because it's a taboo in that community, was that your mother let you decide if you wanted to be part of the film. And I thought that was very beautiful, because I remember very vividly how she came on camera at the end of our conversation and she said, "It's up to Lexi. Now that I met you, it's her decision." So she just needed to meet me, which is totally understandable. Lexi was 15, right? Or 16.
I was somewhere in there, and yes, forever grateful to my family, because they have been, specifically my mom and dad, very supportive about me sharing my story to help other people. So really kudos to them, because it hasn't been easy for any of us. So.
Right. And Angel came to the filming with her mother as well. So that mother was also there to protect her somehow into what is happening, how is it going to be. So parents are there to protect, sometimes too much, right? And sometimes to the point that some kids say, "Leave me alone." Like, I don't need your advice. But we all need that, knowing that there's someone around us that will support us and hold us.
No, I mean, if I could just, you mentioning that my mom was there was funny, because knowing that there was some discord, like that was actually a big moment for our relationship, was her being there. There's a lot of things especially with my mental health, that, to be honest, it was kind of like, I don't care if this is not going to be accepted. I was always that child we were avoiding, even just being approached by children's aid growing up. So they're like, if anyone's going to spill the beans, it's going to be Angel. Because I was always just open about it, because I felt like I did feel like somehow this could help someone in the future. And her being there was kind of a step forward to be like, we were all growing up, and she was seeing all of us were struggling with our mental health, because cause and effect was real, and she was starting to accept. And her being there was kind of a step forward, saying, I accept that this is real. and I'm going to be here for the conversation. And she learned a lot that day, even too. She heard me say things that I had never even said to her. So it was interesting that you brought that up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I want to thank each of you for sharing. We're coming to time. Unfortunately, this is a very important conversation, and I feel like could go on for hours, which I would be okay with. I love these conversations. But yeah, we're closing for today. But I want to thank each of you for being vulnerable, for sharing, for answering tough questions, for paving the way for the future. It's been a very inspiring and important conversation, and each of you have such vast expertise and are undoubtedly propelling the space forward. So thank you again. At this time, I'd like to invite Jim back. We'll do some closing, and Christy will also share some information about what we have on the plate for the next little bit.
Thank you, Michaela and Christy, for moderating yet another just spectacular panel. And I just also want to note the heartfulness and the courage of some of our comments in the chat. You know, when we get down to these kinds of issues, it really sensitizes all of our vulnerability. And there's power in sharing. You know, you did, Lexi, today, and others. So I just want to acknowledge that and express that I'm feeling quite humbled by the conversation today. And I just want to thank all of you for it. And Meredith, I want to thank you, you know, as a health professional, you know, the challenges that you go through on a daily basis, because we're all in uncharted territory in fundamental ways, no matter who we are or who we're relating to. And that's just sort of what's true about our world in the 2020s. So thank you for your professionalism, I would say, and the way you've handled it. And I would wonder, just as we come to a close, is there anything, having heard this discussion, is there anything you want to add or any closing comments that you may want to make?
Well, it's just been such a pleasure to be here today and get to know all of you. And I would just say, you know, just keep going. The human spirit is so powerful. You know, we just need to keep trying, keep going, keep working together, keep being together. I think through the pandemic, we were all separated in, you know, such an astonishing way. We'd never experienced that before. So coming back together as community, being together, having this conversation, I think is essential. I think together we can do anything. So that's what I'd like to say, I think.
Well, that's a very hopeful note. Together we can do anything. That's actually true if we put our minds to it. That's actually a true statement.
Yeah.
And then I would love to just have maybe the young people comment. And I think probably you too, Tom, know me, you know, as parents, on my notion that the criticality of our global situation and the unprecedented nature of our situation is reframing the relationship between parent and child. And I want to just bring this back in because to me it's very important. And I know for myself as a parent, when I began to really realize that the world was out of control, I didn't know really what was happening or how to explain it to my sons. I began to see them more and more as peers. And that had a remarkable transformation on our family dynamics when I began to just acknowledge that they knew a lot more about technology, for example, than I do to the present day. And they knew a lot more about the gender fluidity that was taking place. They knew a lot more about the mental health challenges that were taking place. And so for Claire and I going through a process of understanding that there was actually a synergy between the generations And that allowed a freedom for them to emerge as leaders in some of the dimensionality of the family constellation, and then us to be wise elders in another dimension of the family constellation. And it was a profoundly, I think, empowering experience, at least in our little nuclear family unit. And I would just love to have various of you comment on this, whether I'm just a crazy man and this isn't, this should not be the norm, or whether in fact, as I would suggest, history is at a tipping point, and every category of relationship needs to be rethought and reformulated in a new way. And in this particular case, in a way that empowers the young to lead in ways they've never been empowered to lead before. Any comments?
I'll go ahead and start, and very much invite each of you to jump in. I mean, for me, the reason why I do the work that I do around conscious leadership is, and I've shared this before, we as a species have to evolve our consciousness. We have to evolve the way we're being with each other and on the planet. And it's part of the reason why we're doing the conscious leadership work, our programming next week here on Humanity Rising. It's all of our systems were developed with the best of intentions, our banking systems, our education systems, our healthcare systems. They were all designed at a time when the world was very different, 50, 60, 75 years ago. And we as a species have to evolve our consciousness. And as I shared earlier this week, what I've observed in the last several years is that each of the youth here on the screen, you've got a different set of DNA than I have, that people of my generation have. And like the analogy of the caterpillar having the caterpillar DNA, the butterfly DNA, and imaginal cells, each of you young people have something in your DNA that allows you to experience the world in a different way, to bring a different level of consciousness that I'm hopeful will help the human species evolve our consciousness. And it gives me tremendous hope. And my job in the generation of the responsibility of my generation is to support you in doing programs like this, supporting filmmakers like Nomi, and getting these important films out there to help the world understand that you hold the future, and it can, with our help, with our support, can help evolve human consciousness in a way that's necessary.
Thank you, Tom. I'm very touched about the whole week. It's been an emotional journey for all of us. I think every panel discussion that we had has been extremely intense, very emotional. And it brought a lot of reflections and a lot of thoughts. I don't know if all of you had that feeling, but for me, certainly it was a whole day of thinking about what we talked and what we could have talked and what we could have said and what we said that I did not expect. It was really wonderful. So thank you. I want to thank everybody really for being part of this incredible conversation. When we talk about conscious leadership, let's not think about the leaders being the ones at the top. If I may, Tom, this is your expertise, but can we think about you, each one of you being the leader of whatever you intend to do? Take that leadership and that empowerment that you deserve, that knowledge that you bring, that strength, that DNA that Tom is talking about, and become that leader. You have already become ambassadors of the film in so many ways. Your voices and your stories are the ones that are inspiring. In so many places around the world, people are saying, when I saw them talking, when I saw these young people talking on screen, it made me want to speak as well. You're already inspiring. the curve that we have seen through this week, in seeing the progress of a lot of you from where you started. In some dark moments, we share so many of them, and coming out of it, it has been incredibly satisfying for me to see, but also I think it's inspiring for anyone who knows you and who has seen that, and many more that will hopefully listen to this conversation. Finti talks about prevention a lot, and I think that her conversations are so important because it's all about prevention. If we are able to speak about all of this now, and more, and continue that conversation, hopefully we'll break that stigma that we all want to break. And other generations are going to have to get used to that. This is what we talk about now. They got used to the Beatles. I remember when my grandfather told me, I cannot understand why you listen to those people with long hair. You should be listening to Vivaldi instead. And he got used to. At the end, he was singing the Beatles song. He loved it. He loved to sing Yesterday. I think that if we talk more about it, their ears will get used to it, and their minds will be open, and their hearts will be with you. So don't stop talking about it, and continue with that. I also want to take a moment to thank all of the experts that join us this week. It was wonderful to have Donna Valpita talk to us about the ways of empowering the brain. And I encourage everyone to go and look at the resources that are at the Humanity Rising website, and search it, bring it to the schools, be part of what you're doing. It's an incredible, useful resource. I also want to thank Suzanne Sherkin for her participation, and encourage everybody to read her book, When Gender is in Question. You can find it on Amazon. It's a fantastic awakening book to parents and to who are going through the transition, or with kids who are in a different gender than what they were expecting that they were, just to talk about gender equality. It's a great book. So When Gender is in Question, take a look at Amazon. And talking about the awakening brain, of course, Dr. Miller, who joined us with her wonderful book, The Awakening Brain, and she took us into that journey that it was so beautiful to talk to the people that love us here in this earth and who are deceased. I think it brought us all into a very special moment of reflection. We are all loved, of course, and we need to remember that when we forget about it. So let's bring all of those people with us. I don't have enough words to thank the participation of Dr. Goodall yesterday. Thank you, Tom, for bringing that forward. It was like being with the Pope, as I told Tom. It was amazing. It was this world leader in our conversation about youth mental health with all of you. So that was beautiful. And Dr. Sagan, thank you for your contribution. It was really wonderful to have you and get your perspective. So thank you so much. To all of you, join us, keep on joining us in the conversation, connectingthedotsfilm.com. Be part of it, be part of the movement. Don't be shy, talk about mental health, and bring and host the film in your community and be a leader in that conversation.
Thank you, Nomi. We're having a special session tomorrow, everyone, a special Humanity Rising session specifically to air the film. So we invite all of you to join. It'll be at 8 o'clock Pacific time, which is our usual time. So it'll be at this time on Saturday. You're all welcome to join it. The film is for free for everyone checking in. So you'll all be sent a link to the Humanity Rising session, just like you receive every day. This is just an additional Saturday special Humanity Rising program. So we'll see many of you back here again tomorrow. I feel that Christy and Michaela, as our moderators and as voice of the young, Why don't you just make whatever closing statements you would like to make, and then we'll bring the program to a close. Maybe Christy, you go first.
Thank you so much, Jim. It's really been a pleasure to join you all this week and share in these conversations with you. And I just wanted to thank everyone who's watching and participating in the chat. We see you and we hear you, and we're really glad that you're all here. It's been so wonderful getting to know all the participants who joined us this week from the film. I was really moved when I heard your stories through the film, and it's lovely to meet you all virtually. And thank you so much, Tom and Noemi and Jim, for having us, and Humanity Rising for hosting us. It's just been a real pleasure. Pass it to Michaela.
Thanks, Christy. Yeah, I agree with everything that you said. And I think just adding on to that, I think Christy and I, as we've mentioned before, we work together. We work at a system level in the youth mental health space, and sometimes it's difficult to see some of the hope at times, because in a lot of ways the system in Canada anyways, and globally as well, from what I know, has its challenges. It's come a long way, but there's still challenges. So sometimes it can be hard to see hope, but these conversations really bring that hope back, I think. From hearing, fellow youth talk about their experiences and being brave enough to be in an international film, and to be on panels like this and speak. Like, I'm moved by each and every person, and to hear, the professionals in the field share their experience, to share space with Humanity Rising has been absolutely phenomenal. And Noemi and Tom, just your vision with the film and producing something like that is absolutely profound. So I think it's all just beautiful. And then as well, the folks who are in the chat as participants, it's been absolutely amazing to see the engagement. It's rare to see engagement like this. So it's been beautiful to see that and have people reflect and having conversations. So I think just all around, this event has given me a lot of hope, and I'm really grateful for every single person who's tuned in, who's participated, who's helped support on the back end to actually get the event going. So yeah, thanks for bringing more hope to all of us.
Thank you, Michaela. Thank you, Christy. Nomi, thank you for producing such a masterpiece of insight, and I would say provocation in our culture about an issue that we've repressed for too long. The film is really a milestone event, and I encourage everyone to see it wherever they can, to host community viewings, because it really is at the heart of how we, as the human family, need to interact with one another with more care and with more compassion. First of all, by recognizing that we have a problem. Okay. And in recognizing that we have a problem, we can reach out to everyone with a renewed sense of empathy and caring that every individual so richly deserves. And I would just say, as we approach now nearly 500 sessions on Humanity Rising, that this week has been among the most profound and challenging, but also inspiring. So I just want to thank all of you young people from the bottom of my heart as a parent. I want to thank Tom and Nomi and Meredith and Suzanne and Lisa and the other sort of adults for their participation. It's been like a family, and it's been heartful. It's been transparent. It's been authentic, and it's been transformational. So I just want to acknowledge all of you and thank you very deeply for your participation. That'll do it for today, everyone. You're all welcome to the after session chat group. Those of you who can join, you'll see the links in the chat box. Go to www.connectingthedotsfilm.com for how you can spread the word and create viewing opportunities. And if you would like to join us here again tomorrow, same time, 8 a.m. Pacific time, you're welcome to see the film as part of our Humanity Rising contribution and as part of our way of supporting this extraordinary documentary. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy your weekend. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Bye. Take care.